The largest battleship ever built is sitting on the bottom of the East China Sea right now. 72,000 tons of steel. 9 guns so massive that each turret weighed as much as a destroyer. A ship that cost the modern equivalent of $2.5 billion, built so secretly that workers signed their lives away, and nearby houses had their windows boarded shut so nobody could even glimpse the hull. The Yamato went down on April 7th, 1945. That was 80 years ago. And nobody has raised it. Nobody has tried. You would think the answer is obvious. It sank in a war. It is deep. There are thousands of men still inside. Leave it alone. But the real reason the Yamato is still sitting 340 meters below the surface is something its builders in 1937 could never have predicted. And it has nothing to do with the depth, the pressure, or even the 3,000 sailors entombed in the wreck. To understand it, you need to know how the most powerful warship ever constructed became the most expensive coffin in human history. And it starts with a problem that no amount of money can solve. Other warships have been salvaged before, and after Pearl Harbor, the Americans raised entire battleships from the harbor floor and put them back into service. The German fleet scuttled at Scapa Flow after World War I was hauled up and scrapped for metal over the following decades. Those ships sat in 25 to 45 meters of water. The Yamato sits at 340 meters. That is over 1,000 feet straight down in the East China Sea between Japan and Okinawa. And the ship is not in one piece. When the forward magazines detonated, the blast tore the Yamato apart. The bow section lies on its starboard side. The stern is upside down. Debris is scattered across the seabed. In 1985, a survey team found the wreck and confirmed its identity with the help of one of the original designers. They came back in 1999. Both times, the only things they managed to bring up were small personal items, a bugle and eating utensils, not a single piece of the ship itself. In 2009, the Kourei Chamber of Commerce announced a plan to salvage just the main gun turrets and the front section of the hull. Each turret alone weighs 2,780 tons. The estimated cost ran into billions of yen. The plan quietly disappeared. No executive committee was ever formed. No funds were ever raised. Because the math does not work. 72,000 tons of dead weight sitting in pieces at a depth that makes conventional salvage operations impossible. Even with unlimited money, no proven technology exists to lift that mass from that depth. You cannot crane it. You cannot float it. You cannot piece it back together underwater. The Yamato is physically unreachable. But even if it were not, even if some future technology made it possible to reach down 1,000 feet and pull 72,000 tons of steel to the surface, Japan would still never do it. Because the story of how the Yamato ended up down there is the reason it will never come back up. And that story begins with a single question from an emperor. The Yamato was designed around a single idea. Japan could never outbuild America, so it would outgun her. One ship, carrying the biggest naval guns ever forged, protected by armor thick enough to shrug off anything the Americans could throw at it. The plan was called Kantai Keisen, one decisive battle, one perfect weapon. But by the time Yamato was commissioned, 1 week after the attack on Pearl Harbor, that idea was already dead. Pearl Harbor itself had proven it. Carriers and aircraft, not battleships, now decided naval wars. For 3 years, the most powerful warship on Earth sat in port. She burned fuel Japan did not have. She consumed resources Japan could not spare. Officers called her a floating hotel. She fired her main guns at an enemy surface ship exactly once, at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and even then the engagement was confused and inconclusive. By April 1945, Japan was out of options. The Americans were invading Okinawa. And then Emperor Hirohito asked his military advisors a question that would seal the Yamato's fate. He said, "Where is the Navy? Have we no more ships?" That question, born of embarrassment rather than strategy, set everything in motion. Within days, Admiral Toyota ordered Operation 10 Go. The Yamato would sail to Okinawa with enough fuel for a one-way trip, beach herself on the shore, and fight as a stationary gun battery until she was destroyed. She sailed with 1 light cruiser and 8 destroyers. 6 fighter planes showed up to provide air cover. 6. The Americans sent 390 carrier aircraft. Here is the part you cannot make up. The Americans already knew she was coming. They had decoded the Japanese radio transmission. They knew the details of the operation before some of the Japanese captains did. The most closely guarded secret in naval history, the ship built behind sisal curtains and boarded up windows, sailed straight into an ambush that was never a secret at all. It took less than 2 hours. 11 torpedoes, 6 bombs. At one point, the damage control team deliberately flooded the starboard engine and boiler rooms to try to keep the ship from capsizing. They drowned hundreds of their own sailors in the process. The Yamato rolled over and exploded at 2:23 in the afternoon. 3,055 men went down with her. Only 276 survived. That is why the wreck is sacred. Those men are still inside. Under international law, the Yamato remains the property of the Japanese government. It has been consecrated as a war grave by both Shinto and Christian ceremonies. To disturb it would be an act of desecration, so the Yamato stays. Too deep to reach, too sacred to touch. You would think that is the full answer. But there is one more reason, and it is the one that makes the Yamato unlike any other shipwreck on Earth. 3 months after the Yamato sank, the world changed in a way nobody saw coming. On July 16, 1945, the United States detonated the first atomic bomb in the New Mexico desert. That explosion, and the 528 atmospheric nuclear tests that followed over the next 4 decades, did something irreversible. They contaminated the atmosphere. Every molecule of air on the planet picked up trace amounts of radioactive isotopes like cobalt-60. And here's why that matters for the Yamato. Steel is made by blasting air through molten iron. If the air is radioactive, the steel is radioactive. Every single piece of steel manufactured on Earth since 1945 carries trace amounts of nuclear contamination. For everyday use, it does not matter. But for sensitive scientific instruments, it matters enormously. Geiger counters, medical body scanners, particle accelerators, and space exploration equipment all require extreme precision. For these tools to work with precision, you need steel that has never been touched by nuclear fallout. The only steel like that left in the world was made before the first bomb went off. It is called pre-atomic steel, and it is one of the rarest materials on Earth. Most of it is gone, recycled or scrapped decades ago, but some of it still exists, locked inside shipwrecks on the ocean floor, shielded from atmospheric contamination by the water above. Up to 40 World War II wrecks have already been illegally plundered by salvagers hunting for this steel, and the Yamato is sitting on 72,000 tons of it. That is not just the largest warship ever built. It is potentially the largest single deposit of pre-atomic, radiation-free steel in existence. Steel forged in 1937, sunk in 1945, and sealed beneath 340 meters of seawater for 80 years. A ship built in absolute secrecy by workers who signed their lives away behind curtains of sisal rope now holds a secret that nobody in 1937 could have dreamed of. Not military secrets, not weapons technology, the purest steel left on Earth. So why is the Yamato still on the ocean floor? Not just because it is too deep, although it is. Not just because no technology exists to raise 72,000 tons from 1,000 feet down, although none does. Not just because 3,000 men are entombed inside and the wreck is legally and spiritually protected, although it is. The Yamato is still down there because it is worth more sitting exactly where it is than anything we could do with it on the surface. The moment you raise that steel, you expose it to the same contaminated atmosphere that makes it irreplaceable. The act of saving it destroys what makes it valuable. That is the final irony of the Yamato, a ship designed to be invincible, obsolete before it ever fought, built in the deepest secrecy imaginable, carrying a value its creators never could have imagined. The ultimate weapon, now the ultimate time capsule. 72,000 tons, $2.5 billion, 3,055 men, and beneath all of it, the purest steel left on a planet we made radioactive 3 months after she went down. If that changed the way you think about what is sitting on the ocean floor, you should see what we found when we looked at the other 40 warships that someone already got to first. The Yamato was built to win a war. It ended up becoming the one thing worth more than any war could ever justify disturbing.